why when he did it, it would trigger me. I knew he had a past. I knew he had an ex. I knew they had a history. I knew they were married and even had kids together. And I understood all of this. But it would still trigger me every single time he did it. Mwah! Someone who experiences borderline personality disorder can be triggered by so many things. So I wanted to make a video for those who have borderline personality disorder and as well for those who love someone with the disorder so that you can understand what kinds of things trigger the one that you love. Now, I would never be able to list every single trigger that a borderline may have, but I can provide some insight onto some things that I have found that trigger me, as well as others that I know that have the disorder. Now, I find some of the triggers that I'm going to list off today interesting because they are oddly specific, and I actually find that a high number of borderlines are in fact provoked by the triggers. But remember, not every borderline will be triggered by everything on this list. Every borderline is different. You may find one or two things on this list that are a trigger for the borderline in your life. You may find that none of them resonate, or maybe you find all of them do. A borderline is like a fingerprint. No two of them are the exact same. So sit back and relax, and let's go over the list of triggers for borderlines that I compiled. Now remember, if you or you suspect someone of having borderline personality disorder, seek professional help in your local area. There is help out there. This is something that is completely treatable with the right professional help. And honestly, personality disorders are so complex that you would want someone who has a ton of experience and works with it every day to help you. So without further ado, let's look at what kind of things may trigger someone with BPD. The first thing that I put on my list was a cell phone. This was something that was always triggering for me. There's just so much with a cell phone. For one, it is everyone's lifeline to cheat, okay? It is just so easy today. And I know we are all psychologically enticed each and every day. So the reality of being abandoned is real when your partner has a cell phone. And if you don't have high self-worth, self-esteem, and self-love, it's easy to fall in that trap where you could feel like your partner may leave you for someone better. Also, there were times when I wanted my partner to pay attention to me and not the cell phone. So it would trigger me if he was looking at memes or watching videos. Another thing with the cell phone was if he didn't reply back. I would get triggered anytime he left me on read. There were so many times that I just wanted to completely do away with cell phones because honestly, it seemed easier to just get rid of the problem rather than face all of the triggers that it brought with it. Number 2 on my list. I find this one interesting because it's something I haven't actually done a lot of research on, but I have found a lot of borderlines I talk to and interact with actually have a reaction to it. And I myself am also triggered by it. Now, it's oddly specific, so this one may be one where not every borderline is triggered. But number 2 on my list is loud noises. If dishes are banging in the sink, if someone's voice gets too loud, if something is dropped unexpectedly, it can trigger someone with borderline personality disorder. Now, I would love to hear from other borderlines on this one and know if loud noises trigger you. And if they do, where do you think this comes from? Is it a fear that we picked up in childhood based on our environment? Let me know in the comments because I want to know how common of a trigger this is for borderlines. Now, the third thing that may trigger a borderline is people replying back K and nothing else, just K. Or the thumbs up. Those responses are so short, and it can be interpreted by the borderline in so many ways. Saying something like love you instead of I love you, it can do the same thing. Words are very important to borderlines. They pay attention to everything you say. I remember when I would get upset if my boyfriend would say my house instead of our house. Kind of sounds silly to say that out loud, but that was a true trigger for me. Number 4 on the list of borderline triggers is comparison to someone else. Borderlines already usually struggle with self-worth issues. So comparing them to someone else, making them feel inferior, can trigger them. Also, I have seen borderlines compare themselves other ways. So my friend Victoria, she's currently dating this guy named Josh, okay? And they have been together 2 or 3 years, probably like 2 years. Now, we all actually went to school together. So they know each other in high school. They knew each other in high school, but they actually never dated. Well, she knows the girl that Josh dated and eventually married. And anytime Josh slacks, she compares herself to his ex. So she would say, like, well, if you could do this for her, then you can definitely do it for me. Anytime she knows he's done something for his ex in the past that she wants done now, she will have a strong emotional reaction if his first response is he is not going to do it. Now, number 5 on the list is someone canceling plans last minute. This can be friends, family, kids, spouse, anyone the borderline is close to. It feels like total abandonment and rejection. Borderlines are often highly sensitive beings, so this one can sting a little bit if someone does this to them. Another trigger is not getting invited somewhere when you see everyone else is out. It hurts getting excluded. I will never forget, probably 10 years ago, I was trying to get everyone in the family together to go on this dinner train. So a dinner train is actually where you eat a nice meal and you ride on a train and you see pretty sights. Well, I tried to get everyone in the family together, but everyone's work schedule conflicted and it just didn't work out. So imagine the shock when I got on Facebook one day and my mom, sister, grandma, my whole family had gone on my day off. They had gone to the dinner train and never invited me. I had a meltdown that day. But all these years later, I see their point of view. They were about an hour away from the train where I was about 2.5 hours away. They lived close together, so they were all at my sister's house and they had talked about it, and then they just took a spur-of-the-moment trip. It was nothing more than that, but my brain went to the worst and went down a wormhole of negativity. But none of that meant that they hated me or that they weren't going to include me on their other adventures. And in fact, we ended up eventually all going on a dinner train. Another thing that may provoke a borderline is someone getting better than them. So a borderline may get triggered if their spouse starts going to the gym and staying pretty consistent with it, going to get their hair trimmed, dressing nice, succeeding in their career. Anytime someone that is supposed to provide security in a borderline's life starts improving, the borderline's little abandonment radars start going off. It's like if they get too successful, too good looking, too popular, then goodbye they go. Because why would they stay? So a borderline may react to someone if someone significantly in their life starts improving themselves. Catching someone in lies can be extremely triggering to a borderline. Leaving without telling the borderline goodbye can make the borderline feel abandoned, rejected, or not important. Being ignored is another trigger. If someone is talking to the borderline and is distracted and not paying attention, not really listening, or if the borderline texts and isn't replied to, all of these things can greatly impact the borderline's reactions. The next trigger may just be specific to me. But I absolutely hated when my boyfriend would call his ex by her nickname. So, like, if her name was Jessica, he would call her Jess. But most people that knew her would call her Jessica. I don't know why, when he did it, it would trigger me. I knew he had a past. I knew he had an ex. I knew they had a history. I knew they were married and even had kids together. And I understood all of this. But it would still trigger me every single time he did it. It was like they were on another level using that nickname. Like she still meant something to him, or they still had a connection together. And I didn't like any of that. I guess deep down, I felt like if that connection was still there in any part of the way, there was still a way to revive it. And that would leave me abandoned. Now, another trigger borderlines may face is engulfment. If you start to smother them, someone with BPD may get provoked. A borderline may not feel like being responsible for meeting someone's emotional needs all the time. Sometimes borderlines can be triggered by making a mistake or a fear of making a mistake. I've noticed with some borderlines that I interact with, they have a tendency to be a perfectionist. Special places can trigger someone with BPD. If the borderline has an emotional attachment to a specific place, then seeing it or talking about it may bring up those emotional flashbacks, which could cause a reaction out of the borderline. Smells can trigger a borderline because it can bring up those memories. Some borderlines get triggered when they feel overwhelmed, like they cannot handle all of the pressures that are being put on them. Also, some borderlines may not be able to handle you talking about other people. So, for instance, if you are dating a borderline woman and you bring up another woman, let's say your coworker, even though it's platonic and there's nothing there, it could trigger your girlfriend because borderlines are masters at perceiving any threats. Anger can be triggering as well. Certain tones in people's voices can set a borderline's mind racing. Now, that's the list that I could think of offhand. What other triggers can you think of? I feel like this list can be pretty endless because having borderline personality disorder as well as loving someone with BPD can be exhausting. Now, if you ever want to get some insight on your situation, I'm here to talk to you. I will leave my email in the description and we can set up a time to speak. Right now, I am doing donation-based time slots and the time slots are 30 minutes. Now, I am not a licensed therapist, so I will not be able to help in that regard, but I am someone who experiences life through the borderline lens. And I would love to talk with you about your experiences and hear how it has affected your life. So if you are interested in setting up a meeting, look in the description below. Now, I know I have been immersed in the borderline field for a while, so sometimes I forget the basics, and that's why I created this video for next Sunday. It's Borderline for Beginners, and it goes over all of the criteria for reaching a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. So if you are interested in seeing what the criteria is, then this video would be great for you. Now, as always, thank you again for supporting my channel, and I will see you all in the next video. Mwah!